We are joined today by Mette Dyhrberg and Joshua Manley. They will discuss their new product, Mymee. Mymee, a new health application which provides a 12-week data-driven coaching program, an intensive, one-of-a-kind offering for people that are serious about transforming their health. You'll work one-on-one with Mymee head coach Joshua Manley to design and carry out your own 12-week self-tracking project. Analyze your personal data and turn this data into useful, insightful information that can transform your life. Please welcome Joshua and Mette. Hi, Josh and Mette. Thanks for coming on Savvy Central today. How are you?
Great.
Very well, thank you.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Thanks for having us on, Christina.
You're welcome. I'm so excited about your new product. We're all trying to get healthier and find ways to get healthier, and I found out about your product. It sounded like a great way for all of us to find a way to take care and to get more in touch with our bodies and track our own health. And so I'd love if you could tell the audience a little bit about how you came to creating Mymee and what it's all about. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
So Mymee came about because of our own needs, probably most other products, but we were ill for many years. Myself had a good 10 plus years of going to the doctors, seeing specialists, having weird things happen all over the place and going to the emergency rooms way too often and not really being able to find any reason behind what was happening. At the time, I was in my mid-20s and I was medicated like I was an elderly person, 70 plus, I would say, with cholesterol lowers, blood thinners, diabetes medication, plus a lot of autoimmune diseases popping up all over the place. And my co-founder, Thomas, had for his entire life had a lot of allergies, especially from April to October. His life was severely different. And we just didn't really have a lot of energy. Despite our age and optimism, it just didn't seem to really add up. Coming from the background of economics and my business partner in software development, we used to going out and consulting companies where we look at the process. We basically would go in, you look at a company and you look at how things are about and you basically try and optimize that process. But we didn't feel that our doctors were trying to optimize anything. They weren't really even interested in the process or how we were feeling. They were much more interested in basically labeling what could be wrong with us and then medicating that problem. And after having done that for a few years, we realized that that didn't really work for us. So we started Mymee out of a need to kind of figure out, basically grasp our own situations. And through looking at our own data, we found solutions so that we no longer are ill ourselves. And now we've taken on the challenge of trying to help other people find the root causes of their diseases and change their situation.
And that is so sad about how it operates in today's medical system, probably all around the world, not just here in the United States, is let's diagnose, label, and medicate, the first thing. And if not medicate, let's rip it out or poison it. And it's a sad state in that those are the ways in which we heal the body, in which case it's not really heal. And also the way medical establishment deals with disease is kind of like the war on cancer, the war on this. And it's just not a healthy way to go about trying to heal your body. And so I really liked what I heard there about Mymee being able to pull together data for you able to look at it and then come to a root cause of what could be causing your illness. Now, could you tell us a little bit about how that works, how someone, when they get your product, can use it to help find the root cause, get to the bottom of the solution, and implement it? Can you tell us a little bit about how that works?
Yes, but first off, I also just want to say that I feel that there's so many amazing doctors out there that are really interested in doing the best they can for their patients. But when you only see a patient 2 minutes every 3 months, you have a still shot. And if the blood work doesn't show anything, then to that doctor, there's not really much to do. So what we are trying to enable is people by self-tracking and establishing a picture of the 3 months between those visits, that when they bring that back into the doctor's office, the doctor have a much better idea of how to treat the person.
But also, to further touch on what you just said, self-tracking, how have you seen that taken in by doctors? Because I know myself, I try to be a little bit more educated than maybe the average patient when I walk into the doctor's office. And I find that that is always not met by the doctors and the medical establishment. They're kind of like, well, you're the patient. You're to come here and do what we tell you. You're not supposed to go on the internet and research on your own because you are not a doctor.
Yes.
So have you come across?
I definitely see very different responses, and not only from my own, but users of Mymee have told us very different stories. Some have said my doctors were really open. They looked at the data and they could see that there was things that they had not ever touched upon. And then you also have patients that come back and say, you know what? My doctor basically didn't even want to look at it and had no interest in pursuing this route because he knew better than I did. And I think one of the things we try and let people know is that if you, and I know this by my own situation, is you end up feeling a little crazy, because if you feel that you're ill and you keep getting the answer that there's nothing wrong with you, at some point you basically get to the end of the rope where you're like, oh my God, maybe I'm making it up. Maybe I'm not really as ill as I'm. And I think that is probably where people feel the most lost. So I think one of the things that Mymee enables people to do is to empower them to feel that they're in the driver's seat again. Because once you see your data, then you can look at the dynamic complexity and you can see, oh, whenever I have this symptom, it's always following up to whatever situation. And I think having that makes a huge difference, because you have something that you can trust.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think to touch a little bit on what the doctor's response is to self-tracking and to, I wouldn't call it self-diagnosis, but paying more attention. Mm-hmm. Definitely, I would say what comes out of our platform is paying attention to your own self, paying attention to your symptoms, and really getting down to how does my lifestyle impact my health, either inside of a diagnosis that I've been given by a doctor or outside of it. Like, what is actually in my control and what isn't in my control? And I think a lot of times people will get a diagnosis from the physician and think that anything health-wise that happens as a result of that is kind of as a result of that diagnosis. Mm-hmm. So they come out thinking, well, I'm getting headaches twice a week now. It must be related to my diagnosis of lupus. When in fact, it could definitely be something that's related to lifestyle, that's related to diet, that's related to gluten, that's related to sugar, that's related to lack of exercise, maybe lack of sunlight. I mean, there are infinite number of possibilities for what's causing the headache, but you come out thinking, I'm sick, I was given this diagnosis, and whatever happens is a result of that diagnosis. So I think by putting this kind of a tool into the hands of people, you empower them to try to discover what it is that's actually going on, what's related to this maybe genetic illness, and what's not related to it. What's in my control, what's outside of my control. So you empower people to take control of their health. And so in terms of what physicians get out of that, it's mixed, mm-hmm. Which is why we don't often say, take mounds of data and give it to your physician. We say, we're going to help you pay attention to what might matter and what might not matter by looking at your diet, by looking at your exercise routine, by looking at things like that. And if you discover something for yourself, that's powerful. And so we're not so much, although we do work with some doctors, and we are working to integrate it into medical practices, we're much more interested in the empowerment of the person than we are of, trying to give the doctor more information.
I understand, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a good point. I had a friend a number of years ago who was diagnosed, or actually wasn't diagnosed for several years, with a thyroid issue, a hyperthyroid issue. And she was getting, just as Mette had said, a number of doctors just saying she was crazy. These are not real symptoms. Mm-hmm. You're not sick. It's in your head. And she's like, well, I'm dreadfully tired. I can barely get out of bed in the morning. And they didn't want to hear it. And for years, she just kept going about and getting sicker and sicker until finally they did diagnose her with extreme hyperthyroidism, and they had to take her whole thyroid out, or most of it out. And it was sad that had she had Mymee at the time, she could have maybe seen the patterns and made changes in her diet and lifestyle that could have prevented that operation or that extreme situation from happening.
Mm-hmm. And at least not felt crazy.
Yeah, exactly.
Because clearly something's happening, and that's one of I think Mette was touching on that really well, is that sometimes you go from doctor to doctor and they're trying to diagnose something and nobody can find it, and eventually the doctors start to think you're crazy. And then if enough people tell you crazy, just like the psychological studies, if enough people start telling you you're crazy, you start to become crazy, or at least feel like you're becoming crazy, and you start to kind of lose your grip on, okay, what am I making this all up on my head, or is it something that's really happening to me? And so it can lead to this really, really awful cycle. Mm-hmm. And so we'd like to tell people, like, no, it's very well could be something that's wrong, but let's pay attention. Let's build a bigger picture of what's going on. Let's figure out when you're tired, how often you're tired, how intense the tiredness is, whatever it happens to be related to. Let's help you kind of build a bigger picture of what's really happening. So we try to take the opposite approach of nobody's crazy, of nobody's. Let's give everyone the benefit of the doubt and find out more about what's going on.
I love that as well, because once you do come in and you've built up the data and you've seen a pattern, then you can come in educated and say to your doctor, okay, here is XYZ times I'm tired after I've had major sugar. I've cut out the sugar. I feel way better. Let's see where my sugar level is. That's better than just saying, I have headaches and I feel really tired. And the doctor's like, well, I don't see anything in the blood results. So, it must be in your head. This gives him something to really work on so that he knows what tests he can order to help you out.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think also one of the things that we have to be wary about here is that we as humans are not really very good at looking at things removed in time. We're really good at, eating a huge pasta dish and then feeling bloated or uncomfortable. What that is caused by. But if something is 1, 2, 3 days removed in time, we have no way as humans to kind of feel that. Like, that's just not how we work. So once you have data that's timestamped, all of a sudden you can see correlations in your data that was just not visible to the eye.
Mm.
And I think headache, let's talk about headaches as a perfect example. You go into the doctor, I experience headaches. You go into the doctor and they say, how often do you experience headaches? Mm-hmm. And you're kind of like, from memory, I think maybe once a week, once a month. How intense are they? They seem to be pretty intense. And you kind of lose sight of how often you experience headaches. And so you can't really go back and build an accurate picture. How many headaches you've had. Are they in the morning? Are they in the afternoon? Are they once a week? Are they seasonal? Unless you have a better idea of when they are. So we help people kind of build that picture.
And what's really good about what you just said there, Josh, is that many years ago I got pulled into the emergency room for chest pains, and the doctor was asking me a list of questions. They have a list of questions to ask to try to get to the bottom of what this really is they're dealing with. And there were a couple things I had forgot to tell her at the time because, you're being tossed into emergency room. There's people all around you. They're hooking you up to machines, especially when you have chest pains. They really take it very seriously. And I forgot that I'd been feeling weak and dizzy throughout the day. And I totally left that out. And later on, I mentioned it to my doctor, and she was angry that why didn't I tell her that before I started all the tests? And it's not like I was trying to be a bad patient. It's just that I forgot.
You're like, I just don't know. And especially in the heat of the moment, you get in there and you're like, well, I don't know.
I forgot.
Like it's stressful. I don't know. You're asking me all these questions. I can't answer them right.
Exactly. And that's what I like about Mymee is that because you're keeping the data over a period of time, then you'll have a correlation, you'll have a pattern, and you'll be able to say to the doctor some valid information, not just, oh, yeah, I forgot about the dizziness I had a week ago.
Yeah, you can be like, I was dizzy actually this morning at 9 o'clock, and I marked it as a level 10 because I almost fell over. Mm-hmm. And then I was actually dizzy last Tuesday, too, at 3 in the morning when I woke up. You can really pinpoint and say, this is my experience. I captured it in time, and I can tell you.
Mm-hmm. But one thing that's important to note here is also that obviously, the purpose of Mymee is not to have people track everything they do from here and onwards. The idea is to work with people for a limited amount of time. 3-6 months is the usual, where you basically figure out what's going on, what is the underlying root cause. You get people to a place where they don't feel sick anymore, and then they go on their way. So the idea is basically also because self-tracking is a commitment. You are going to flip out your phone during meals, whether you're about in town or whether you're home, take a picture of your food or write a comment and so on. So there's an investment from the person doing it. And what we've seen is if your problem is big enough, it's a small sacrifice. But to just have a lot of data, it just wouldn't make sense.
Mm. So tell me, can you walk us through it? How does it work when someone comes to you and says, okay, I have this issue. I have headaches continually. It's like migraines. I don't know how to resolve it. And you say they work with you from about 3 to 6 months. How do you work the process so that they get to their end result and root cause and then start to work to resolve it? How does that work?
So I've worked with a number of people individually. Mm-hmm. And so for starters, we'd sit down with somebody and first off, try to figure out what's important. Mm-hmm. So if you come to me and maybe you're trying to lose weight, maybe you're trying to figure out what's causing your headaches, maybe you're trying to figure out what's causing burning fingers and toes or something like that, the very first discussion we have is what is really the most important issue that you're dealing with right now? And what if you solve that it would kind of make everything else in your life a little bit better or a lot better. Mm-hmm. So the very first thing we do is dig deep into what is the real problem. So you might have been diagnosed with lupus. I keep using, we've worked with people with lupus before. So you might be diagnosed with lupus, be experiencing severe burning in your fingers and toes, and decide that, okay, biggest issue that I'm facing right now is that burning in the fingers and toes. I want to try to figure out what that is. So we'll first frame it. What is the most important thing that you're dealing with? And then what we do is let's again take burning in the fingers and toes. So if you're experiencing burning in the fingers and toes, chances are you've got some sort of idea of what you think might be going on. Everybody does. Mm-hmm. So you're like, oh, you know what? I have noticed on occasion in the past that when I eat sugar, I've got a little bit more burning in the fingers and toes. I have noticed that when I eat gluten, I experience this headache or this fatigue or something like that. So you start to build a bigger picture of what could be causing it from the lifestyle, from diet, from exercise, from sleep, from stress. You know, what is it in the lifestyle that could be causing this symptom or this thing that you've described as the most important thing that you would like to solve? So we build a bigger picture of what the problem is, and then what the possible causes could be. And then we send people on their way to begin tracking both the symptoms and the things that may be causing them. So if it's gluten, for example, we'd send them away and say, okay, track gluten consumption and also track your pain. And this week we're going to do an experiment and we're going to cut out gluten and see how it affects your pain. And so then we start experimenting with people. We say, okay, well, let's take your hypothesis and let's test it this week. So each week they come in, and each week we will test more and more hypotheses to see if there's an effect on the overall symptoms.
This requires a disciplined approach to the person who's going to work with you. And I've heard quite a few doctors say they get a little frustrated at their patients. Say someone comes in with diabetes and they're supposed to lay off sugar and they don't. And then their insulin levels are through the roof or whatever. So it really takes for you to get better, and if you want to work with you guys and make your health better, they do have to have a disciplined approach of, for one, tracking and making the desire that, yes, I'm going to go through with this and follow it through.
Yeah. I will say though that when the whole point of self-tracking is also to take some of the weight of your own shoulders, because when you are in a situation where you go to a doctor, for example, right now, usually if they want to figure out what your allergies are, they basically tell you to eliminate everything for like 12 weeks and then start reintroducing things. I don't know about you, but I know nobody who's actually, that's not true. I know one person who actually eliminated all the food groups for 12 weeks and then started reintroduction. Most people will last, my bet is, a few weeks and never actually get to the point of reintroduction. So they'll just continue living with allergies. What we do is we essentially try and test out as many things as possible coherently, but also if your phone is giving you feedback so that you know, okay, I'm not supposed to do this, I'm supposed to do that, then it also is kind of keeping you aligned. It's somehow easier for our brains to do things that way, where it's like, these are the rules, and if you stick by them, you will get through it. And then we basically, as soon as we see that something doesn't really have an effect on something, we reintroduce it immediately. So it essentially also means that for some people, it will get them to a result so much faster. And being that they can see in their data validation that this is no good for you or this is actually fine, it also allows people to feel at ease. Because one of the things that often happens is that when people come to us, a lot of times some of them have almost started to getting afraid of a lot of different foods because they have ideas that this might not be good for you. And then my grandmother told me this, and my cousin told me that, and my husband told me something different. So all of a sudden, there's all these different advices. And I think, just to recap what we talked about earlier, is that healthy by society standards or by all of the advice you get is not necessarily the right thing for you, your body type, your specific situation. And I think the data makes us able to pinpoint and identify what is the exact root cause with your body type, with your system, with your genetics, and then address that issue.
I like that a lot. I have a good friend of mine who's been dealing for many years with colitis. And he, like you were just mentioning, have been told by the medical establishment what foods to cut out, by his family, by his closest friends, don't do this, don't do that. And pretty much he eats almost nothing. He has just a couple items on his list that he eats every single day, and that's it. And he's scared to touch anything else. And when we started hanging out, I said, oh, no, but vegetables, why don't you try some fresh raw vegetables or something? He's like, no, that'll get me sick. This is what other people told me. And for years, he wouldn't touch a vegetable at all because he assumed it would give him a bad result. And one day he tried some fresh broccoli, and it did wonders for him, made him feel awesome. And then now he's introduced vegetables. But it's true, those things being told all around you could actually be detrimental to you. And I like the fact that this gives you the power to really know the root cause and what can really be good for your particular body. I love that.
Once you see in your data that something is bad for you, once you realize, oh, I do A resulting in B, and you see it over and over, you automatically, without even having to think about it, without having the struggle of, oh, I can't eat gluten or whatever, you basically start just doing it by yourself. Our ways, I think, is that one of the reasons we don't do all of these things that we hear about is because we don't trust them till we see them. And all of a sudden, seeing it black and white just does something to people.
And that makes a lot of sense. You know, if someone has been a big sugar fan all their lives and you go to the doctor and the doctor said, hey, your insulin levels are through the roof and therefore just cut out all sugar instantly overnight. I mean, go cold turkey, that's not going to be easy. And it's something that you've loved all your life. And now you're just saying, throw it out the window. And this gives you the power little by little to see the results, what it's actually doing to your body. Is it really harming your body? And if it is, do you want to continue on that road? It allows you to make the choice without being forced into it.
That's, exactly.
I love that.
Especially important that kind of built into our technique is that none of these changes that none of these experiments, we call them weekly experiments that we do, none of them have to be permanent. And so there's a psychology in that, oh, well, I can just try this for a week and see what happens. It's not that I have to cut out sugar for the rest of my life. It's that I can just try it this week. And if I feel infinitely better at the end of the week, maybe I will decide to cut it out. But we're not like saying you have to make permanent health changes. We're saying, no, let's just figure it out. Let's just figure out what's happening.
Yeah. But also I think that one of the personal stories that I could share is that I had a long period 2 years ago where I basically just got weirder and weirder symptoms. I was what I think my surroundings would call aggressive. I was numb in my right hand and arm. I basically just not feeling very well. You deal with it, and I thought, oh, maybe I'm not excited about life this week. You kind of just deal. And then a friend of mine came to work at my place for a few days, and he immediately noticed that he was feeling weird. His girlfriend, who's a speech pathologist, told him, he's also Danish like myself, his girlfriend, who's a speech pathologist, told him that his language were deteriorating, that he basically didn't speak as good English as he had when he had left in the morning. So he came back and he's like, there's something weird happening. I'm feeling all these weirdness. So we started basically tracking to figure out what was happening. And we found out that for both of our sakes, we felt worse when we had been spending time in my apartment. So we started looking at, could it be, like a fungus, or what could be happening in my place? And it ended up being that we took, pictures of the gas meter and different things. And after a few hours, we could see that the gas meter had moved significantly. So I called the gas company. When they came out, he immediately dismissed the claim because he said you should be able to smell gas in here. So I was like, but look at the pictures. We have images here showing that the gas meter is running despite not having used any gas. Okay, just because you have the pictures, I'll go and get my ladder and we'll check it out. And he came back in, and the minute he stepped up his ladder, he said, open doors and windows, there's definitely a gas leak here. But because I have really high ceilings, the smell that they add to the gas had kind of risen, so you couldn't smell it. But basically, I had been sleeping in an apartment for weeks that had gas leak. And if we hadn't been able to prove that, that's actually what's happening, we most likely would have just continued to live in it for another while until it had gotten a lot worse. And I think in general, it's you looking at, and for sure that happened to me, it's like, maybe I'm just not feeling well because I'm not sleeping so much at night. But you're not thinking, I'm not sleeping so well because there's a gas leak. You're thinking,
Mm-hmm.
What is happening in my life? Am I eating differently? You look at things that you normally would look at.
Mm-hmm.
So when you get sick, it's almost the equivalent. There's an outside thing happening to you that would not normally happen. So you don't really know how to react to it. And this kind of gives you a way of looking at the dynamic complexity of your data and figuring out what is the impact and how can I remove the impact.
Exactly. I mean, I think we try to dig really deep into people's lifestyles. So how is it that you live? How do you wake up in the morning? So kind of riffing on what Mette was just talking about and trying to determine that there's a gas leak or something like that, we might ask somebody questions which are, well, have you slept at somebody else's place? Have you noticed the same symptoms? Have you noticed, like, trying to figure out from these types of questions, is your experience always the same? Do you always have headaches? Are you always not sleeping well? Or are there times when you do sleep well? And if there are times when you do sleep well and there are times when you don't sleep well, why is that? And so we dig really deep into people's lives to see if we can't find something that's different, something that's off, and eventually pinpoint, as Mette was saying, that cause.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I like what Mette was saying when it initially was happening to her and her friend. They were looking, of course, we reasoned it away and said, oh, I'm just a little tired today, or maybe I need more sleep. And I think it's interesting that a lot of times we feel symptoms and we want to reason them away and just say, I'll just sleep some more. Or I need more coffee in the morning. And
Absolutely.
yeah, and I like that this particular tracking system allows you to go deeper and realize that, okay, maybe it is the most simple explanation that, yes, I need more sleep, but maybe it is something else, but it allows you to look at all the evidence, which I really, really like. So tell me, what was the biggest struggle getting your process up and running, and how did you overcome it?
So essentially, one of the biggest struggles when you're facing something like this is everyone around you telling you, if it was that simple, don't you think somebody has done it already? Essentially, people have a very big authority to doctors and to the system. And I think it's also because you want to believe in the system. You don't want to think that there's anything broken.
Mm-hmm.
So for you to go out and say, I don't believe in the system and I believe there's other ways, definitely it was a challenge in our case because most people had to see the facts before they started believing in what we did. Now when we have the cases and you can prove you can change people's lives and you can change people's blood work and stuff, then it's different. But I think the biggest struggle whenever you start something new, and especially when you're looking into 3-5 years into the future, it's not something that people are doing right now, then I think the biggest struggle is actually believing enough in you and the idea to keep going despite everyone telling you that it's a little off.
I think part of the reason for that, Mette, is that I think in our society we've been taught kind of to be the little children in our health, and that we've been taught to give all the power over to the doctors and not to think about it, be the good little patient, do what you're told, take the pills, and don't play a role in your own health. Now, that's not all doctors, as you mentioned. There are some great Western medical doctors out there who want their patients to play a role, but kind of society-wise, we're kind of taught to really not play a role in our health. And so when now you have a wonderful product like this, there might be some resistance from society going, well, no, I like this, the way I've been taught in society that I'm just supposed to lay back and do nothing. And now you're telling me I could play a role in my health. No, I'm not comfortable with that. So it's meeting that that resistance.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's important as well to say that we're definitely not anti-doctor and definitely not anti that establishment. I think if anything, we'd love to aid in the process. We'd love to be kind of that additional thing that you need to fill in the gaps between visits, to build a bigger picture of what's going on in people's lives, to kind of fill that essential need. So we like, as I said, I think earlier, we collaborate with doctors, and we're not anti-doctor, we're not anti-physician, and we're not even anti-Western med. We're very we're just pro figuring out what is going on. So if you're going to take a medication, it's a good idea to try to figure out how you figure out if it works for you, because we know that not all medications work for everyone. So it's a good idea to try to figure those things out for yourself. But we're definitely in favor of the system, but know that it needs some changing. So.
And what I like about that, that's what attracts me to Mymee myself, is that I'm also not for throwing away all modern medicine, because it's been great and wonderful. I mean, can you imagine there was a time we didn't even have anesthesia? We'd have to have our teeth ripped open and have surgery without anesthesia, and major surgeries like heart surgery, which, is when your heart is not working well, you need it taken care of pretty quickly. You don't have time to wait. Modern medicine has been working wonders, but what is great is to get off of in society that we can't contribute, and to have doctors and patients realize that as a team we work more efficiently, that together we can actually help create a more healthy society. So tell me, guys, what is on the horizon for Mymee going forward?
So right now we are basically getting learnings every day, every week from working with users and figuring out how we can optimize it, how we can make it better, and how we can use that feedback to automate the process to get to a result even faster. Because initially when we started out, it was a very handheld process, and now step by step we are improving it, because we've known that the faster you can create a result with anyone, the better not only is it for the person, but also the easier it is to kind of get people on the mode of discovering new things.
Yeah, so I think scalability, taking it to the next level. So we've been working primarily individually with people as a sort of health coach, but next generation coaching, if you will. But obviously the goal is to take all of those learnings, all of those things that we're figuring out. How do we ask questions? How do we self-direct people? How do we help them manage their own conditions and symptoms better? So we're taking everything that we learned from the sessions and building it into the later programs, where we'll scale it up and people will be able to go through the programs themselves. They won't necessarily have to sit down with a coach all the time.
And anyone interested in today reaching out to you guys, finding out more about Mymee and using the service, how might they do that? How might they get in touch with you both?
I think they can go to the Mymee website and there's contact details, or they can email or call Josh directly.
My email is josh@mymee, mymee.com. And my phone number, which I'm also happy to give, is 614-571-9293. And we can definitely have a conversation about the specific needs of the person.
Great. That's awesome. I love that you created this wonderful service and health product. And do you have any last words of advice you'd like to leave our listeners with?
Yeah, I would. I would say even if you don't end up working with Mymee, it makes a lot of sense to start to pay attention to some of the things that you're experiencing health-wise. So if you'd like, you're trying to figure out what's causing your headaches, starting to just track your headaches in any way that's easiest for you, I think is a fantastic way to get started. So even if it's an Excel spreadsheet or a notebook and a pen and paper, just really keeping better tabs on what it is that you think is affecting your health. And if you end up working with us or something like us down the road, we'll help us ask better questions and get you kind of directed to where you can figure out what's causing some of your stuff. So even if you don't reach out to us and start working with us now, I think it makes a lot of sense if you're trying to figure things out to go ahead and just start tracking in whatever way that means for you.
I also think I would like to add in the end is that you're not alone. I think a lot of people going from doctor to doctor end up feeling very alone. And there's a lot of people out there with the same issues. And there's also a lot of people out there like us that are helping people like them. So if you have a problem and it's unidentified and you don't know where to go, you're not alone. There's people out there like us. And of course, we would also love to help people. I think that's important to state as well.
It is. Thank you so much, both of you, for being on Savvy Central Radio. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina.
Thank you so much, Christina.
It's been lovely.
Join us this Monday for international airline pilot Carleen Pettit, who is a wife, mother, grandmother, and recently published her first novel, Flight for Control.